Hey guys, in this video I'm going to go over the second part of the review. This is going to be questions 10 through 14. Actually I have 214, so I'm going to go over the second page. I'm going to try and go through this fairly quickly, so at any point if you need to pause or rewind, please remember you do have that option. Okay, so starting at number 10, it's asking us to identify the vertex as well as the axis of symmetry for this quadratic function. Now, this is written in vertex form, so I'm going to go ahead and stray away from the calculator. In vertex form, my x value is inside the parenthesis. Remember to always change the sign. So instead of a -4, I have a +4. My y value is that -5. Since I know my vertex, I know my axis of symmetry always starts off with x equals, and it is the x value of my vertex. You can always type it in the calculator to double check. Question 11 is telling us to describe the transformations of y equals -5x squared plus 7 compared to the parent function. The parent function is that x squared. So when I'm looking at this, going from -5x squared and x squared, there's a difference going on. One, I have a negative, which means it's been reflected. Instead of opening up, it's opening down. The other thing, 5 is further away from 0 than this coefficient would be a 1. So that means there's a vertical stretch going on. And then the last thing I see is that +7. That means the whole graph has been shifted up 7 units. Okay, for this one, I will also go ahead and quickly graph it because you will have that ability when you take your test. If I start off with my parent function x squared, I see it starts at the center, opens upwards. Then when I look at this transformation, okay, I can see it's much more narrow. So that's that vertical stretch that's going on. And then it was reflected, so it's opening the opposite direction, and that vertex has been shifted up 7 units. Okay. Here, once again, we're comparing the parent function x squared to change. It's asking what is the new equation if the coefficient is 7 is added and a constant of 3 is added. So here we're focusing on some key vocabulary word. Coefficient means a number in front of a variable. If I'm looking at y equals x squared, my x squared is going to stay because I have that quadratic. Coefficient means it's going to go in front of the variable. So my 7 goes in front of the variable. And then a constant is just your normal number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, normal number. So no variables attached to it. And I am adding 3, so this would be a +3. Okay, shifting over to the next column before I get into this table, it says the function x squared is given. So this is once again that parent function. Make sure you can see here. It says, how will the graph be affected if the coefficient, so once again we have that key word coefficient, of x squared is decreased to 1/4. So I'm looking at 1/2 x squared. Okay, 1/2, that affects my width. Since it's a number between 0 and 1, it means it's going to have a vertical compression. It's going to get squished down and become wider. So my answer there would be A. Once again, you will have access to the calculator, and you can graph the parent function, tab, and then you can go ahead and graph that new equation. And here we can see it has opened up a little bit, and that's what we call that vertical compression. Okay. 13, which will produce the most compressed parabola when graphed? That means the most squished. So I know I'm looking at a number close to 0. Okay, so for the sake of time, I'm not going to do input F or G because 2 and 6, those are far away from 0. These are a little bit closer. If I'm looking at this in terms of money, even though this is a negative, remember that negative just tells you if it's opening up or down. If I'm looking at as money, this would be 60 cents versus 20 cents. Which one is closer to 0? And that's going to be J. And then just to show you a quick few seconds here, if I have negative 0.6 x squared, that's my first option. And then my second option would be that 0.2 x squared. And I can see, even though it's in a different direction, it's more open, which means it's more compressed. Okay? You're going to have some equations on your test, and you need to identify all of these key features. And there's a lot. Whenever you're talking about if it's opening up or down, it's looking at that first term. What does it start off with? Okay, and you are always welcome to use a calculator. Here, I see it starts off with a negative, so I know that's going to open down because it started with a negative. My axis of symmetry from this standard form equation, that's not something that I can see right away. So here I recommend to use the calculator. And if I get my axis of symmetry, if I have it typed in, I can get the rest of these characteristics in fairly quickly. Oops, I typed it in wrong. I forgot my exponent. So I have negative x squared plus 2x minus 1. Okay, we're good to go now. So here I can see my vertex is right on the x-axis. So I have an axis of symmetry of x equals 1. Just to remind you, this would be menu, analyze, analyze, and then I would go to 4 for my axis of symmetry, and then I will click on the graph, and I see it has that x equals 1. My vertex, I already know my x value is 1. I need to get the y value, okay? I see that this is an x-intercept, so it has that y value of 0. You could do menu, analyze, menu, analyze, and get my vertex 2. Click on it, and I see that 0.10, just kind of confirming. Y-intercept, that is always going to be my C value here, that minus 1, so that would be 0, negative 1. Once again, you could trace menu 5,1, and it automatically defaults to the y-intercept. My roots is where it crosses the x-axis. I can arrow over, and it will pop up. It will tell me my maximum, but I also need to know that that's also my x-intercept, your root, your 0, your solution. So here would be 1, 0. Because it's opening down, that is a max. And my maximum value is always the y value of my vertex. Oops, max. Domain for all of these quadratics, as long as they're not a word problem, is going to be all real numbers. And then the range, if it's opening downwards, that means it's got the less than or equal to, all my y values are going to be less than or equal to my maximum value of 0. Taking a look at the next part, same questions. Is it opening up or down? Because this 2 is positive, it's going to open up. My axis of symmetry, since this is in vertex form, I can see my axis of symmetry. The x value, since it's in parentheses, I change my sign, making it a negative 1. My vertex is an ordered pair. My negative 1, I take it from my axis of symmetry. My y value is that negative 4. If you're having difficulties or you don't remember what all of these mean, please, please, please take the time, go back, type it into the calculator. There is no shame. It is a tool. It has been created to assist you, so that way we can spend our time doing other things here. All right, so here I can go ahead, I can get that vertex if I needed to. I already have it, so I'm gonna go ahead and skip over to find the y-intercept because that's the next thing I'm looking for. I can either look here or I can do menu 5-1, and when you trace, it automatically defaults and gives you that y-intercept. So that's 0, -2. My roots, I have a hard time seeing here because they're not whole numbers. Do you guys catch that? When I go over my vertex, it tells me my min and it gives me that -1, -4. Okay, so when I arrow over, the word 0 pops up and I get that decimal. And decimals are okay. There's no shame in having a decimal. So that's one of them, but I know there's another one, so I'm gonna arrow over now to the right. Another 0 pops up and I see my second decimal is at 0.414, and that's okay. Okay, my max and min, it has a max or min. Since it's opening up, that means I have a min. And my min value is always going to be the y value of the vertex. So that's going to be my y equals -4 from the vertex. Domain, same thing, is all real numbers. For the range, that's my y values. Since it's opening upwards, it's going to be greater than or equal to that y value of my vertex. Okay, and then the last one, same thing. Starts off positive, which means it's going to open upwards. My axis is symmetry. I have two choices. I can find the average of my intercepts, so a -4 and a +2, add them together and divide by 2. So -4 plus 2 is -2. -2 divided by 2 is a -1. If you're Miss Covey, I am already on spring break mode. That's fine. Use your calculator. Do not get a question wrong because you don't feel like typing it in. Doesn't take long. Type it in. Okay. I can't really see it, but I can definitely get my axis symmetry. I have options you can trace. You can do menu, analyze, and then I can get go to 4 for my axis of symmetry. I'm going to click on my graph. I see it's -1. Once again, you can also trace to the vertex, it's fine, which I actually do need the vertex. So you can trace menu 5-1 or menu analyze, and then I go to option 2 for my vertices. I click on the graph and it pops up -1, -18. Okay, notice how the x value is the same. My y-intercept is next. So here I can do menu 5-1. This is going to trace. It automatically defaults, oh, you can't see. It automatically defaults to the y-intercept. And it shows me it as a coordinate point, which is nice because sometimes we forget where that 0 goes. For the roots, since we're already tracing, you can arrow over. You have some choices. You can arrow over and see, okay, my root's the same thing as a 0, which is the x-intercept, and it pops up to 0. And then you can arrow over if you want, or you can just kind of count or use the intercept form. If this is a +4, that means my intercept is a -4 because you always change the signs. Notice this was a -2, but I have a +2. Since my parabola is opening up, that means I have a min, and my min value is always the y value of my vertex, which is -18. Domain is going to be all real numbers. My range is referring to the y values. Because this is opening up, that means y is going to be greater than or equal to the y value of the vertex. All right, good luck. Make sure you're asking questions if you have any.